most of all, Destiny has potential. It always has, since the launch. Destiny 2 is the final chance to prove to the public that Destiny is worth their time. It is Bungie's chance to show the active community that they've learned from their mistakes. It's their time to fix the big problems that the game has had. The game's only gotten better, and I think we're only going to get better. It is June 2017. I've just moved to Seattle in hopes of not being so alone and unhappy like I was experiencing in Los Angeles over the past 3 years. I had reached a breaking point and I wanted a change. And it was one of the best things I've ever done for myself. A new space, I got to live down the hall from one of my best friends in this industry, 15 minutes away from a couple of others. Life was getting a lot better, although I did have a moment where I broke down in the middle of a Target at 10 p.m. 2 days after moving while grocery shopping, wondering if I had done the right thing. But as luck would have it, the Destiny 2 reveal event is back in Los Angeles, where I would get my first impressions of Destiny 2 at the live event. Expectations were quite high given such a major sequel. And while opening cinematics and story beats were hyping me up, the feel of the game was left intact, which surprised me because I thought the sequel would try to innovate more. The Strike experience I got to play, the Inverted Spire, felt mostly the same as any other Strike experience. The story content felt like other story missions I've done before. Certain things got massive simplification, like the removal of intellect, discipline, and strength, the double primary weapon system change, and the entire pace of the game slowing way down. And I had a feeling, a not great feeling, but I was still optimistic because this was Destiny 2. Destiny 1 had been getting improvements, and at the end of year 3 of Destiny 1, things were in a pretty decent spot. It just needed to expand on what it had been building, and everything would be fine. The beta rolls around, and now that I get a second chance at the game for longer than one round of something, the issues start to appear. Ability and super regeneration is dramatically slower, which in retrospect seems like a dumb idea, but at the time, abilities were plaguing D1 PvP, and the cracks in PvP were really starting to show. In PvE though, these hits to super and ability regeneration on top of the double primary system were rough. A lot of people started to have second thoughts on Destiny 2 based on the beta. But, as people love to say, it's just a beta, and we didn't really get a taste at the full gameplay experience as far as the campaign and other systems go. The PC beta comes out and is met with very good feedback as far as performance goes, on top of some changes to super and ability regeneration rates before the launch of the game. Tons of high-profile streamers are trying out the game, and I'm excited at the prospect of seeing Destiny launch itself into a potential limelight on Twitch, as it would help my YouTube channel as well. Destiny 2 launches. And the launch period went moderately well, but things quickly took a turn after the honeymoon period was over, which took about a couple of weeks. The game didn't really feel like a sequel to Destiny 1 Year 3. It felt like a sequel to the launch of Destiny 1. The story had a lot more coherence compared to Destiny 1's launch, but what I thought was going to be a year-long story fight against Gaul was over within a few hours, with the final boss being a pushover if you had multiple people in your team. Lost sectors ended up being nothing more than big caves with enemies in them. Guided games, Bungie's sort of response to players wanting an LFG system in-game, had good intentions, but never saw the success I think they wanted to see from it, and to this day is still more or less the same compared to when it launched almost 3 years ago. All of the improvements Bungie had been making to Destiny 1 were seemingly gone in Destiny 2. Everything was way more simplified, but in a bad way. Random weapon rolls were gone in favor of static rolls, making duplicates worthless. Armor stats were neutered. The grind portion of the game felt like it vanished. The Eververse store was packed. Exotics felt like they were turning into toys and their power was much lower. The endgame experience was decimated in favor of a much more casual experience. Even the prestige mode of the raid only offered cosmetic updates to gear. Everything was focused on cosmetics like shaders and armor geometry, with the bulk of the good stuff in the Eververse. The Eververse became the endgame. Fashion over function was the game. And the more active players were not happy, self-included. It was around this time that my content was also making a shift. During Destiny 1, I was much more focused on guides and education. But due to there being so many issues with Destiny 2, my content started to swing towards commentary and criticism pieces. People started to watch me more for my thoughts on current events and the state of the game pieces, much more than they did in the past. I still wanted to focus on education and guides, but the Datto's Thoughts videos were pulling in quite a large amount of views. This was a major turning point for my channel as I shifted more towards macro scope level content, focusing on the big picture of the game. I was focusing on entire systems and sectors, and focusing less on weapon reviews or news or hyper-specific things. And this still holds true to this day. The PC release came and went without much fanfare. It was optimized and played really well, as it had been doing in beta and other events. I got to play with Tim the Tatman and Lazis during the launch, and felt like the biggest jerk in the world playing with and telling them that the best way to level up in Destiny was to grind public events. A lot of people said that they were interested in trying out the game when it came to PC, which was encouraging to me from a business point of view. After all, more eyes on the game meant more people interested in playing, which meant more eyes on my videos. High-profile streamers checked out the game for what seemed like a couple of days before completely tuning out, ending any chance of Destiny breaking into the mainstream. Destiny still has not had that breakout moment. I'm fortunate enough to still be friends with Lazis, even getting an invite to his wedding a little while ago. I continued with guides on raid challenges, nightfalls, Xur videos, exotics, until we hit Season 2, aka Curse of Osiris. Curse of Osiris did little to nothing to improve on the main issues of the game. Not that Bungie had that much time to respond to feedback, as the expansion was likely content complete already. This was the newest low in Destiny. They added a raid layer, a small raid essentially, but that was really about it for the highlights. Bungie continued with these miniature storylines that felt like they had nothing to do with anything, just random enemies and plot points so that casual players could feel like they completed a story. Curse of Osiris was just another batch of story content which was converted into strikes, something that the community hated at the time, but in current day is something that we could probably use a little bit more of due to how often we get new strikes. The Infinite Forest was hyped on a lot in the reveal stream by Bungie, and while I'm sure it was an impressive technical achievement, it amounted to nothing more than some randomly generated platforms that you would traverse to get to the thing that you actually had to go do. Bungie was also involved in the experience throttling issue that players had discovered, where Bungie was intentionally slowing down experience gains after a certain amount of experience was gained. Not to mention that the Eververse store got a massive refresh. The Dawning 2017 was another breaking point for a lot of people, with the Eververse dominating the event. I tried making a video discussing what might have happened with the shader situation that was happening at the time, but it was ultimately a video I regretted making after the fact. The channel and my morale had reached new lows. It seemed like Bungie wanted to take Destiny in a different direction, a much more casual direction. The RPG aspects of the game were completely gone. The information I provided just wasn't that important as far as guides went. And while controversy tends to bring views, I found myself just not caring about anything going on. I was getting bummed out at the state of the game and my apathy was growing. Xur videos had stopped, Nightfall videos had stopped, Trials of the Nine videos all stopped. All I did was have the same conversations over and over again. I was tired of it. And it was very clear that if things were going to change, we would have to wait until the next major expansion in the fall. Transitioning out of Destiny would have been a massive undertaking, one that I was not confident in making, but sure enough, I still tried some stuff anyway. The time between Curse of Osiris and Season 3, aka Warmind, was spent trying to dabble in variety content. I started to develop a lot of chemistry with the dream team of Mr. Fruit, Blue Westlow, and Robbie V, and the extended family. I introduced Trouble in Terrorist Town to the group, and it's been a staple in our game rotation ever since. I'm very, very thankful for this group and being able to become better friends with everyone. The videos I've gotten to make with them are some of the most fun I've had making content, even if those videos performed quite poorly because, well, it's not Destiny. I also made a full push into Monster Hunter World during this time when it came to serious content, producing about 9 to 10 videos, all of which did moderately well. One of them hit a whopping 2 million views, which is why you might have noticed a few videos with the title format that I used for that video in hopes of the YouTube algorithm blessing me with views. However, I ran out of goals in Monster Hunter, and the appeal of playing and making content on the game slowly wore off. I still frequently get questions about if I'll ever go back to making content on the game, and the answer is still a no. When all hope was seemingly lost, I received an email. The Destiny Community Summit, a gathering of dozens of content creators and non-creators alike. We would meet for 2 days at Bungie to discuss everything. Nothing was off limits. We talked about everything we felt needed change. Random weapon rolls coming back was probably one of the biggest things. Collectibles, guided games, lore, progression, changes to PvP. We asked, what happened? What happened to this game? And we had many good conversations that I believe ended up changing things in the game for the better. We also got our first taste of Gambit during this community summit, something that I thought would end up being one of the better things introduced into Destiny at the time. It was clear, though, that these problems weren't all going to be addressed in Warmind and that they would have to wait for the fall expansion. Warmind, aka Season 3, hits. The story campaign is another short-lived 2-hour excursion where we kill a hive worm god with some bullets and a fire stick. Things just have to be so rushed with these story beats because of how much time it can take to even make those missions. Warmind would seal the deal for this style of storytelling going forward as far as any non-major expansions went, although we didn't know that this would be the last time Bungie stuck to this format. But Warmind and Season 3 were definitely much better than Curse of Osiris and Season 2. Season 3 came with exotic weapon tuning, Crucible private matches, ranked Crucible, masterworking, heroic strikes came back, why did they leave in the first place, and more vault space. Escalation Protocol was the third time Bungie has tried for a public space activity, the first two being Court of Oryx and Archon's Forge. It was fine, but ran into matchmaking problems, a problem that is still around today with events in public spaces. Otherwise, Warmind felt like the typical Destiny $20 expansion experience. We still had loot problems. The Ikelos shotgun was the only item worth getting in the entire expansion. The power leveling system was broken because of the split in populations based on whether or not you owned the expansions. The faction rally event was pretty boring. The game wasn't saved with Warmind, but at least things were stable. September was still do or die. It was around this time that I also decided to make some improvements to my own life. I did a couple of videos with my friends, helping me get a makeover, new clothes, new haircut, new glasses, new everything, essentially. I was tired of looking like a schlub, where my wardrobe consisted of video game shirts that were 2 sizes too big and a single pair of jeans. I had more or less given up on finding a relationship given my work situation and how introverted I was, and still really am. I wanted to look better. I wanted to feel better, as YouTube was getting me down and I was just exhausted. I'm still diving into the fashion world, the sneaker world mainly right now, to make up for the 27 years where I looked like an idiot. Whisper of the Worm, aka Black Spindle, aka Black Hammer, launched in what would be the first of, I guess technically 3 secret missions in Destiny 2, but the first of 2 of this particular style. The mission was kept a complete secret, something that's a rarity nowadays, with a difficult platforming section and an intense combat section. This mission was incredibly well received within the community and is one of those things that I really emphasizes what I love about Destiny. Feeling small in a big, big world. There was even a secret puzzle within the secret mission to solve. What more could you want? The rest of the summer consisted of discussing news bits here and there, the implementation of the final prestige raids we'd get for the time being, and the reveal of the September expansion, Forsaken. However, the only comparisons we had were the Taken King, which was great, and Rise of Iron, which was Diet Taken King. But Bungie came out swinging in their reveal. Random rolls are back. New destination, new story beats, new mode in Gambit, Triumph tab, Collections tab, new supers and subclass blocks, new masterwork system, the revamped weapon system that we have today, new raid in this place called the Dreaming City, and a revamped monetization model in the annual pass. The $20 expansions were gone. No more splitting the player base in a bunch of different ways. The annual pass would consist of 3 content drops during the year: Black Armory, Season of the Drifter, and Season of Opulence, as we'd come to know them. The annual pass gave you all 3, but you couldn't purchase seasons individually, so you had to pay up front for content that wouldn't be delivered for months down the road, which was a concern. Bungie didn't exactly have a ton of goodwill in the community at this time. Talk was pretty cheap, and Bungie had to deliver. Forsaken hits. And it's a hit. A much more refined story with a more serious tone, with Cade's death sort of being symbolic of a change in this tone, and because Nathan Fillion had a new TV show that he probably wanted to work on a bit more. The story wasn't too shabby, with my audience liking it more than the Destiny 2 launch campaign. The fact that we ended up with not 1, but 2 destinations was a massive surprise, with there being more to uncover after the main campaign was over, and the raid also being involved with the storyline. Although this particular storyline stopped after the raid concluded for the most part. The Dreaming City was fantastic with all of its secrets. The Last Wish raid continues to be my favorite raid experience that I've ever had, even if it ended in one of the most notable memes of the past 2 years within the community. Just remember, if you don't embrace the meme, it will destroy you. The weapon changes were great. Armor got perks again, weapons got random rolls, quality of life changes everywhere. There are still debates about which expansion was better, Taken King or Forsaken, which I think is a testament to the quality of Forsaken. Destiny was back in a big way. The game was saved, for now. The channel was also saved, again. I had the second highest single sub growth month ever during Forsaken, along with my second highest total views in a month in the past 3 years. I felt great at the time. I had plenty of videos to make, although things would eventually slow down to their usual guides, reviews, and thoughts on things. Raid challenge modes, however, during this time would slow down dramatically on the channel. The challenges I was able to do during the Crota Golden Age were simply not possible on other raid bosses due to there being a greater focus on mechanics and enrage timers. I grew tired of the formula. Let's only use this gun. Let's only use that gun. Not to mention that these challenges weren't even really that impressive anymore. In later raids, people would end up doing 2 or 3 man raids within days of the raids being completed while I was still working on guides. And it's kind of tough to compete when I was doing 6x Rat King kills on bosses compared to 3-man flawless runs. It just wasn't that exciting to do anymore. By the time I got around to trying these 2-man challenges, the appeal was no longer there from a viewership perspective. Sure, it's still going to improve my skill set and it's still something to do on Destiny, but I just don't really have the passion for it as much as I used to. I won't say that they're gone for good, but I haven't had much ambition to do them, just because I don't think they're very interesting anymore. There was one significant negative from Forsaken though: the removal of Trials of the Nine. Bungie had said that they wanted to revamp the mode and would re-release it when it was ready. This was a massive blow to PvP players, especially content creators who ran Trials carries on the weekends. We wouldn't see the return of Trials for several seasons. I'm guessing Trials was removed for multiple reasons, but one of those was probably security. DDoSing was rampant in later seasons on PC, and having Trials be ravaged by that was probably not something Bungie wanted to have to fight. It was also around this time that I met Danielle, my girlfriend, through sheer luck and timing. Fun fact, while we originally met briefly at E3 that year, she says she felt the first flicker of interest in me because of this clip. It's about the titties on the inside. Yeah, dude. On the inside of the shirt. Ooh, I felt gross saying that. I felt gross. A few months later, Jez played matchmaker on accident by pulling us both into a raid group for content. We ended up having dinner in a group a couple of weeks later by sheer random chance and hit it off. I love her a lot.
I'm trying to kind of say for Tetris, like I'm not kind of like I could build
right
people and stuff, but I kind of want to build something.
Why is my mouth big?
On.
Funny how she walked into my life as I had basically just given up on trying to find a relationship. She came with me to Sweden on my Anthem excursion less than 2 months after we started dating. She's been a beacon of support for me. And she's also given me the opportunity to look at games from a different perspective, something I've needed for a while now. My schedule could no longer just be 14 hours of gaming and editing every day, which definitely changed my perspective. She's hilarious and talented and attractive and a great script. There it is. Great script editor. Yep. You're laughing in the middle of it. I'm going to put that in the video. Forsaken comes and goes. It is a success. And now we move into a new era of mini expansions, aka seasons, starting with Season 5, Black Armory. These seasons would not be like the $20 expansions. There would be no new destination or story missions to dig through. They revolve around a central activity, which would be the gameplay loop for that season, and the storytelling would happen over time, spacing things out so that players had things to look forward to over the course of that season, instead of just burning through all of it in a week. Sounds good in theory, but in practice, this model struggled to keep players excited. Although as a content creator, in practice, it was nice because I'd hopefully have something to cover every so often during the season. Black Armory launches in a not so great way. In order to even stand a chance in the day one festivities, you had to go back and grind up power levels first, and even then the opening forge was brutal because the level was set much higher than people anticipated. Any momentum that Bungie might have had was immediately cut short because most people couldn't participate in the first day activity. Bungie was fast to nerf the power level required, but it still left a bad taste in people's mouths, even if Bungie said that these seasons were supposed to be an extension of the endgame. Scourge of the Past was a solid but relatively easy raid, all things considered. However, this was the first raid that launched with a major issue. You were able to infinitely revive people when normally you can't. Not the greatest thing to happen, but this is the worst thing that things would ever get with regards to raid launches, which gives Bungie a really solid track record. Seasonal weapons would boot up big time here, with Breakneck, Mountaintop, and Loaded Question being the offerings for Black Armory, a slightly long-term grind in order to get more powerful than average legendary weapons. This concept was well liked overall by the community, a non-time-gated grind for good items. Mountaintop would prove to be an amazing PvE weapon, and one of the most frustrating and brain-dead PvP guns in recent and long-term memory, something that still plagues the game to this day. Pinnacle weapons in general would prove to be a problem in the game as well, as most of these guns were by far the best options to use in most content in the game, leaving little room for non-pinnacle weapons to shine. A highlight of the season was the Niobe Labs puzzle event. Most would say that it ended up being a massive negative because it delayed the launch of a forge, but if it weren't for two iffy puzzle clues, Niobe Labs would have gone down as one of the best events in Destiny's history. A great puzzle event combined with a very intense combat event, something I'd still recommend people go try out. I was in the fortunate and unfortunate spot of closing on a house around the exact same time as this event launching, to the point where I delayed moving and had to buy a few extra days in my apartment to make sure I was able to stream on the first day of the puzzle. I was also in Sweden for the bulk of the puzzle solving for the emblems for Niobe Labs, so unfortunately I missed out on that as well. In the middle of all of this, it was announced that Bungie was going to be splitting from Activision and that Bungie would self-publish their game. Rather, Activision would be splitting from Bungie after Forsaken had not met sales expectations, or maybe other reasons in addition, or maybe excluding that. Regardless, this meant that Activision would no longer be on Bungie's side, and going with Activision would be the studios that were helping Bungie during this time, Vicarious Visions and High Moon Studios. The community rejoiced, as it was generally assumed that a lot of the problems in the game were the result of Activision's doing. However, we wouldn't see the results of this change for several months, as content was built or being built already. The start of Year 3 would signal that these changes are truly in effect. Overall, Season 5 wasn't too bad when we look back on the entire thing, but it was clear that people still wanted more of a cohesive story experience, and that these one-offs were not really cutting it. Before we pushed into Season of the Drifter, Anthem, a Destiny competitor, launched. Anthem is a game that I had been a part of for the previous year, going to events and feedback sessions to cover the game. Coming from BioWare, it seemed like it would be a slam dunk. E3 2018's gameplay demo felt pretty solid, although I wasn't really blown away. I went to Sweden to partake in another capture event, and a familiar feeling started to creep in. A Destiny 1 launch feeling. And my only thought was, not again. Not again. Another event in January before the launch would confirm my suspicions. This game was going to be in a rough spot when it launched, and sure enough, after 2 or 3 days and 3 videos, I had uninstalled the game and tossed it onto the pile of other games that I tried to cover that inevitably collapsed. The Kotaku article that followed the launch of the game really shined a big light on why the game launched the way that it did. But this was another huge hit to me mentally. I had spent a lot of time and resources preparing for this game to be potentially the next big thing, and having it collapse less than a week in was brutal. Anthem is still in its rebuilding process. Season of the Drifter launches and brings Reckoning and Gambit Prime, a remix of Gambit. The Day 1 experience was considerably better than Black Armory's. People could participate in the Day 1 festivities, and there were catch-up mechanics in place for those who fell behind. Unfortunately, Reckoning Tier 1 was a snooze fest on Day 1, and if you didn't like playing Gambit, you had almost nothing to do this season. This would be the first and last time, as of now, that Bungie makes a seasonal activity loop based on a specific game mode like Gambit. With no raid this season, endgame players were left wondering what they should do with their time. In the middle of Season of the Drifter, I took my first vacation since graduating college, going to Japan with some friends, although Danielle was unable to join me, which was really tough on both of us as she had just moved in a month prior. However, I still had a blast in Japan and still have days and days worth of footage that I recorded when I was there. I just never got a chance to edit any of the footage together, but maybe during the spring I'll try to make something. I would love to go back in the future. This was also the first time that I hadn't been vacationing somewhere for work purposes or with my parents, so being able to do things at my own pace really made me realize that, no, I don't hate traveling, but rather I hated having to squeeze in so many activities in a single day like I often had to do with my parents.
I mean, what are the odds?
Where did you buy that song?
I didn't buy it, it was just on the YouTube library.
That's why it's here now.
I can't believe it.
Do it.
Get to the drop.
It's the same
Just
song.
what are the odds?
I returned from Japan to the launch of the next secret mission, 0 Hour, another glowing achievement in the world of secret missions that Bungie has done. Not only was there a secret mission, but there were multiple paths based on difficulty, a great exotic and Outbreak Perfected, and Catalyst, and another puzzle within the mission. The puzzle itself did have some problems, like the main item disappearing from inventories, and the reward for solving this 3-week puzzle being a massive, bulky ship that not a lot of people liked the look of. But 0 Hour was an overwhelming success and refreshing surprise in a season that focused on something that people were really growing tired of. Season of Opulence is far and away the best season of the year, featuring another raid, our third in less than a year, and the Menagerie. Math class would yet again be placed into Destiny meme history by getting baited into thinking that we got World's First when we all got the raid exotic, when we actually got World's Second, losing by 6 minutes. This practice of dropping the exotic with World First ceased with the launch of the next raid, having the exotic be a quest instead of a random drop. I cried the night before, immediately after, and the night of this raid launch from the stress. I don't really enjoy the World First race anymore and haven't really enjoyed it for quite some time. It's still something I'll continue to participate in until the end of the franchise, but let's just say I'm mentally ready to be the Patrick Ewing, the Charles Barkley, the Steve Nash of Destiny. The Menagerie was Destiny's first 6-man match-made activity with a ton of player agency with regards to how players got their items. They could choose specific weapons to get, and even the masterwork. The encounters within the Menagerie were raid light, where you actually had to do things and not just solely kill enemies. A bug that enabled people to get 5 or 6 items per run was a huge catalyst in its success as well, although that would be fixed eventually. The Menagerie was peak seasonal content, to the point where I believe it may have ruined the game because it was so good in both rewards and gameplay. Anything less than this would potentially be viewed as a failure going into the future. It was also around this time that I made a video ranting about the state of PvP and PvE. In PvP, supers, power ammo, and scavenger perks were all out of control, and in PvE, damage buff stacking made a mockery of challenges that were supposed to be the most difficult in the game. All of these would end up getting tuned within a couple of months' time, with general player power getting nerfed across the board in nearly every category in the fall. That all sounds pretty brutal, but Bungie admitted to the fact that one of the only ways to challenge players in something like The Reckoning was to knock us off the map, or in the case of Heroic Menagerie, to one-shot us. Fortunately, things were not nerfed enough for us to feel like we were back in Destiny 2 Year 1. We rounded out the summer with a quick trip to Borderlands 3, but I never had planned on making videos on the game. Destiny's next expansion, Shadowkeep, would be delayed a couple of weeks, which allowed for some time for me to stream Borderlands. I played it really hard for about 3 to 4 days before ultimately stopping, as I had gotten everything I wanted to get out of the experience. I did not want any distractions as we went into Shadowkeep. I had the honor of being the host for the Shadowkeep reveal on Bungie's stream. Bungie asked me to write questions based on community concerns to ask during the stream. They did not ask me to ask any specific questions, nor did they ask me to hold back, although they never promised that they would be able to answer all of my questions. I really hope I did you guys proud on that one. Again, we found ourselves with a new seasonal model, but this time, seasonal content was all on Bungie. There were no other studios or publishers to help. Luke Smith had acknowledged that the team struggled to keep up the pace that they did with Season 5, 6, and 7, and that things were going to slow down content-wise, which made sense. Bungie had also heard the cries for a more cohesive story, yet again, and had plans to have each season's story flow into the next season. Seasons would also be a la carte. You could buy them individually or a bundle instead of being forced into the bundle. The game was also undergoing some technical issues, as the game had bloated into a massive download size, which potentially led to how seasonal content would work going into the future. Seasonal activities would be removed after that season was over. While this prevented the game from bloating, it also made it so players who stepped away from the game for a while only came back to one season's worth of content. Shadowkeep launches to lukewarm reception. It came with a new raid, dungeon, strikes, and a story campaign more reminiscent of what we were used to. However, the story yet again, introduced an ambiguous villain, culminating in a final mission that stops right before it actually gets started, which still has not gone anywhere, although Season 10 events might finally trigger this storyline to start up again. The bulk of the story felt like just doing busy work for the most part, although those not familiar with the moon destination from Destiny 1 maybe didn't feel this way. Universal ornaments are introduced, allowing for the fashion game to stand out a little bit more. The armor system was revamped again, where mods became perks, and intellect, discipline, and strength were reintroduced into the game after a 2-year hiatus. Armor 2.0, as it was called, I thought was a success for the most part. The seasonal artifact, new to Shadowkeep, sought to bring seasonal metas, where you'd have to use certain guns in order to defeat new enemy types called champions. Season 8 also introduced the Season Pass, akin to a Battle Pass that you might find in other games. Surprisingly enough, Shadowkeep had better viewership than Forsaken did with regards to video views, but not subscribers. Shadowkeep was only the second time that I had hit over 10 million views in a single month. It was also around this time that I had finally hit 1 million subscribers after over 6 years of the channel being active. It was a long time coming, and there have been plenty of times where I thought I should just stop YouTube, times where I was burning out, but I knew once I started to climb to the 700 and 800 range that I was just not going to stop until I hit that 1 million. I had come way too close to stop. We celebrated during my stream with a recap of the history of this channel, sort of like what I'm doing now, but just way less formal. I never got around to editing it, which is why I never had a video talking about hitting 1 million subs. But hitting that 1 million subs also hit me mentally in a negative way. That was my pinnacle goal. 2 million seems impossible at current rates, and I didn't have something new to work towards. Ultimately, while Shadowkeep wasn't too bad, Season 8 itself wasn't exactly thrilling. Vex Offensive amounted to killing waves of enemies, then another wave of enemies, then another wave, with the final seasonal event, the Undying Mind, changing almost nothing about the activity. Season 8 kind of got a free pass though because it was included with Shadowkeep, and because Shadowkeep content really carried it. Season 9 is revealed and is a bit more well received than Season 8 overall. It featured a menagerie-light style seasonal activity in the Sundial, and a couple of pretty good story missions detailing the return of a beloved character in the Destiny universe, Saint 14. However, the threat of the Red Legion bored people as it was a storyline that felt wrapped up quite a long time ago. It was really starting to show that help from the other two studios was sorely missed. Bungie was probably now working with almost half their usual workforce compared to the previous year. They simply could not produce enough content in these seasons to satisfy the needs of the community in these drops. There was no raid or really any endgame focus in Season 9, and if Season 10 didn't have a raid, it didn't seem likely that we'd get one until Season 12. Season 9 also featured a new secret mission, but not in the style of 0 Hour or the Whisper mission. This was more about community puzzle solving, which came down to building a giant maze, mapping it out, and then running through the corridors of time in the proper sequence. This culminated in being given access to an exotic quest, Bastion, but the exotic quest mainly consisted of busy work, which put a sour note on the ending of this community puzzle. The puzzle was also designed in a way where it couldn't really be reasonably brute forced, meaning it took about 4 to 5 days of entering puzzle pieces by a select group of people into spreadsheets to get the answer. I think most people prefer the secret missions and not so much these types of puzzles, but I would take either one at this point. I was around for the very first day, which I thought was the most fun day, but already had a trip planned to PAX South and had to miss the rest of the puzzle solving process. I had a good time on my trip, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't upset about missing out on this, both from a business perspective and from a fun perspective. Impeccable timing, yet again, for me. Season 9 drifted into Season 10, which didn't really have a seasonal activity so much as it introduced a new public event. Based on the new but old threat of the Red Legion, again, They are attempting to crash the Almighty into a planet or something. Again, the Red Legion would fatigue people, although Rasputin became a much more central character in this season. As I write this, we are about 2 to 3 weeks away from the end of the season as we push into Season 11, so the ending is still currently unknown. People are also wondering where this story that started in Season 8 is even going. No older storylines have been concluded or wrapped up, no one knows where this one's going, and frustration again is starting to set in. The only redeeming factor of the season looks like it was Trials coming back, but even Trials couldn't keep people from getting frustrated as waves of cheaters and hackers piled in, ruining the experience for nearly all players. Grandmaster Nightfalls were also introduced, but landed with a thud as hardcore players were looking for repeatability in this and did not get it. Even a secret event mission in The Lie couldn't launch properly for Bungie, with most, if not all players being in a bugged state after having to complete hundreds of thousands of public events, which was initially millions, but was toned down by Bungie thanks to overwhelming community apathy. Community morale is at an all-time low, and if it's not, it rivals the Curse of Osiris days of Season 2. Season 10 has been the weakest of the seasons in Year 3, and Season 11 is a crapshoot. If the most Bungie could muster in Season 10 were public event, bounty, and lost sector grinding, what could they possibly do for Season 11? People were tired of grinding mundane goals for bounties, tired of constantly swapping their gear and weapons for bounties, tired of bounty grinding being the way to play the game. It had been like this in Season 9 as well, but Season 10 was truly the breaking point. The end game for most players ended up being hitting rank 100 on the Season Pass, which was best earned by, bounties. As I write this, it has been 10 days since my last Destiny video. Edit 11. Edit 12. Edit 13. This channel and my morale have reached new lows. And while controversy tends to bring views, I found myself just not caring about anything that was going on. I was just getting bummed out at the state of the game, and my apathy was growing. All I did was have the same conversations over and over again. I was tired of it. And it was very clear that if things were going to change, we'd have to wait until the next major expansion in the Hey, wait a minute! Here we are again, on the brink of collapse. Bungie finds themselves in yet another do-or-die situation with the 2020 fall expansion. History has repeated itself. Destiny 3 is likely nowhere in sight, as I don't think Bungie is capable of developing seasonal content on top of an expansion, on top of a full game release, on top of preparing for the launch of the new consoles. All they have is a fall expansion to bring themselves back, while in the middle of a global health crisis, while working with probably half the workforce they've been used to working with last year. Things are looking rough, but if Destiny is anything, it's resilient. It has stuck around through terrible times and bounced back multiple times, and I don't see why they can't make it a three-peat. Bungie has announced a round of changes coming for Year 4 of Destiny 2. Some good, like the Eververse getting some of their items reduced and put into the game, the lessening of bounties being such a core part of the game, and seasonal activities sticking around for a full year instead of 3 months. Some a little more contested, like weapon and armor retirement. But the time for talk, again, is over. We're listening isn't really cutting it anymore. Bungie's recent updates that went over big issues with the game are encouraging, at the very least from a communication standpoint. It feels like we only get this level of communication when things are at their worst, and I really hope that changes. I find myself thinking more and more about my post-YouTube and live stream life as I enter my 8th year of content production. This past year, I've been giving my mental health much more consideration than I ever have, giving myself the weekend off and engaging in more non-gaming hobbies and activities like cosplay, as much as it weirds people out, sneakers, the stock market, and getting angry at having to mow my lawn. The Datto of 3 years ago is much different to the Datto now. I have a lot more on my plate compared to the alone in an apartment days. I can't game and edit all day, but I don't want to game and edit all day anymore. I enjoy taking time away, which absolutely explains the reduced content output at times. Burnout creeps in much more often than ever. And I don't want to resent what I do because I know how many of you enjoy what I do. And let's be honest, I'm not really qualified to do much else right now. These past 3 years have had their ups and downs, but it's definitely been more up than down. I closed on a house, found a wonderful partner to share my life with, got to go on a couple of really nice trips, cemented my place in the community lore even more than previously, hit 1 million subscribers, started new hobbies, started a merch line, and somehow have mostly kept up with content. And yet again, I must thank all of you who have continued to stick around for the long haul. Or maybe you just started playing and you found my channel. Regardless, I thank you for changing my life in every way imaginable, even more than previously. I thank my clan and my friends for continuing to tolerate the stupid stuff that I'd like to do in-game. Fall 2020 marks uncharted territory. I'm anxious to see what Bungie has up their sleeve. But like I said 3 years ago, I don't have any specific desires for what's in store. I just want it to be good. If you've enjoyed my second retrospective, a positive rating is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.